hearing this about Jesus. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." Check out what Jesus says. "I tell you, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." The stones will cry out. As Jesus approached Jerusalem, now watch this, and as he saw the city, he wept over it. All sorts of miracles are happening. All sorts of praise moments are happening. All sorts of people leaning into what Jesus is doing. If it's you or me, we would have called it a great day. We would have called it a great week. Perhaps a great year in the ministry of Jesus. But yet when he saw the city, he began to weep over it. Some of you may know the story, some of you might not, but my wife and I, we were leading a church in Brisbane in Australia. And through a series of events, we had that work over. And for a few years, we began to feel the city of Dubai on our hearts. But after that season, I remember I was on a transit flight flying into Dubai. I've been here many times. And I remember as we were flying down, I looked over the window, and it was 7 in the morning, or I'm not sure what time of the day it was. It actually wasn't. It was probably 10 a.m., which in my context, usually peak traffic's usually early morning, 10 a.m. And as I looked down from the plane, all I could see was cars as far as the eyes can see. And I started looking, and I saw a truck, and I was trying to make a shape of, is that a Toyota, is that a Mitsubishi, is that, and as I began to look across from the plane into this sea of humanity, I began to dream for the city. And then I remember getting off the plane, and then someone picked me up, a friend of mine picked me up who has been living here for over 20 years, and he was late to the airport. And he said, "Pastor, I'm so sorry. I got out early and it was just unpredictable traffic. And by the way, it rained that day." What's up with people in Dubai they get chaotic when it starts raining? It rains every day in the UK, just so you know. It's just a normal day. And so he started saying it rains. I was like, what are you talking about rain? It's like, when rain, everybody goes into chaos mode. Okay. And so, and I'm not saying a thing, and we kept driving through the roads and all that, and he suddenly started saying, "Oh, traffic again, and traffic again." And he kept talking about traffic. But the thing was, he saw traffic, but I saw broken dreams. He saw traffic, but I saw opportunity. He saw traffic, but I saw another vehicle that needs to experience the love of Jesus. He saw traffic, but I saw somebody that sold their home. Maybe their village sold into them relocating to get a visa, and somebody that's here for a job to fund and fuel and feed their family back home. But I saw somebody that could potentially experience the love of Jesus and encounter God and one day be equipped, trained to go plant a church back in their village somewhere. And so all of a sudden, as my friend saw inconvenience, I saw opportunity. I said, "There's so many people here." We went to Dubai Mall and it was packed. And he kept complaining, but I was like, oh man, the sea of humanity. How many of them know Jesus? How many of them have found Jesus? How many of them are in the church? It's funny though, today, 3 years later, I avoid the traffic and I avoid Dubai Mall. But I'm going somewhere. I guess what I'm trying to say is, so many times in life we can live in a city like the one we live in and not realize the call that God has for us. And it's so real, especially in a city like here, and when I pastor a church like ours, constantly when people come to me for prayer, either somebody needs a visa, a job, a miracle, a breakthrough, and absolutely there's a need for that. But at the same time, I wonder what it would be like for us to start saying, "God, I don't want you to do my will, but rather I want to do your will here in this land and here in this city." I remember in my early days, I would constantly go into the presence of God saying, "God, I need you to do this, and I need you to do that, I need you to do this." And I'm constantly praying for God's will. You know what I learned? I learned that if I know what God's will is, I actually don't need to pray about it. Because if I know God's will, I just need to submit to God's will, and God's will take its course. Are you with me? And so in a city like this, can I encourage us that of all the billions of people that could have found themselves here in this land, you are here for such a time as this. And so I want to encourage you to be thinking about, what can I do in this land? And I've come to realize something, and it's almost controversial what I'm saying, but it is real, that for God to move, many times it has to move me. And here's my first point if you're taking notes. When it moves me, it moves God. When it moves me, it moves God. I'll break that down. There's a portion of scripture in the Bible that says Jesus healed them all. I don't know if you read this passage of scripture, but it says Jesus healed them all. But I like what Leah did this morning. She said before you read that bit, read the one above. And it actually says when Jesus was moved with compassion, he healed them all. See, something moved Jesus, and then the healing power began to flow. And I've come to realize that when it moves me, that's when it moves God. Now, I want to make this clear. God is sovereign. And God is absolutely able to do everything and anything with me or without me. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need you. Sorry. But the reality is, for whatever reason, God has chosen you, and God has chosen me, and God has chosen us. For whatever reason, God has contained his infinite, eternal, almighty capacity to limited, normal, natural human beings like you and me, who need sleep, who needs food, who has BO. God uses us. God has desired to use us. And I've come to realize that if it doesn't move me, it won't move through me. And I'm praying in 2026, and I've been really excited over the last couple of weeks. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had so many people. We've just come up from a season of prayer and fasting, for those of you visiting. And over the last two years that have led you through the season of prayer and fasting, a lot of times it's, I need this and I need that. And again, there's a place for that. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but what I've loved over this season is I've had more people coming to me this last couple of weeks saying, I want to fulfill God's will through me in this land, in this city. And the other one I'm hearing is, I just want to know God. Okay, what do you believe for? I just want to grow in my relationship with God. Let me tell you, God can do something with that. Because when it moves me, it moves God. And I'm praying in 2026 that many of us would further awaken to the possibility of God moving through us as we weep like Jesus did over our city. Number 2, turning up is my responsibility. That sounds pretty simple. Turning up is my responsibility. How many of you have heard of a guy called Jonah? If you haven't, they're doing a supplementary lesson in kids' church, but we'll do a crash course right now. Jonah was a guy, in fact, I love the fact that you may not know who Jonah is. That's the kind of people that Mosaic Church exists for. The people that are far from God, that don't have an idea about the gospel, and we're so glad that you're here. Jonah was a prophet, and the thing is, the portion of Jonah's life that is recorded in the Bible is not the best part. He's considered a disobedient prophet. But if you actually look history and writings, Jewish writings, you'll actually find that Jonah was quite a successful prophet in the nation of Israel. And Jonah was going about doing this thing, and one day God says to him, I want you to go to the city called Nineveh, and I want you to go preach. And Jonah, for whatever reason, and I can understand, because until that moment, no prophet had sort of gone out of their regional circumference. And Jonah says, I'm not sure if I want to go there. In fact, I remember growing up, anytime I would disobey my mom, she would always use Jonah against me. She'd say, Alvin, don't do it, Jonah. Anything. Alvin, do your bit. I don't want to do it. Don't do it, Jonah. It's like, really, Mom? Am I going to be swallowed by the goldfish now? What's going to happen? So anyways, the Bible goes on to say in Jonah chapter 1 and 2 that God says to Jonah, by the way, Nineveh is modern day Iraq. God says to Jonah to go all the way to Iraq, and Jonah chooses to go on a Mediterranean cruise. He goes all the way to Europe. And one thing leads to another. Eventually there's a storm. Jonah gets thrown off the ship. He gets swallowed by a fish. And then I like what happens in Jonah chapter 3, where God is calling Jonah back to his original assignment. We read, it says, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. Someone's going to write a book called Second Time, saying, arise, go to Nineveh, arise. What was that word for the year? Arise, go to Nineveh, watch this, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you. Now, at this given point, Jonah could have called it Sin City, God could have called it Sin City. God could have called it a city filled with immorality. God could have called it a city full of idolatry. God could have called it a city full of abuse and torture. But God calls it great. Because there's this thing about God. God doesn't call you and I based on where we are currently. God calls you and I based on where He's taken us. And I wonder if that is the same for you and I. I wonder if that is the same when it comes to this great city. And I found something, church. It's a little thing that I found. God has this thing for cities. And I believe that God has a thing for this city too. And I've learned this, and I want to say this, and what I'm trying to say is Jonah goes into the city, turns up, preaches. They have a revival that is so intense that none of the other places they've had such a kind of revival. The whole city turns, repents. And I think so many times we get fascinated with revival, but I've come to realize that revival is God's part. Obedience is my part.